And hey guys, it's Kevin again, and we are here to review the next episode of Euphoria, Season 2, Episode 5. An episode that I think none of us are ever gonna forget. It's, of course, called Stand Still Like the Hummingbird, and holy shit, this episode. Look, before we get into it and introduce Henry and everything, this to me, there's a lot of TV episodes I reviewed recently, but this is easily one of the most intense things I have seen in a very long time, and I'm very excited to get more into it. But before we do, I do have to introduce my co-host here, who was just so stunned during this entire episode. I think he summed it up best when he said this episode was uncut gems levels of anxiety, and I would very much agree. Here he is, Henry Ewing.
Wow.
I know. That was my reaction too.
But the next episode was season 1, episode 6.
Oh yeah, they went backwards. They knew this would they wouldn't be able to top this, so next week they're just gonna play an episode of season 1, and then they're gonna continue season 2.
Yeah, Tame and Paula really said
they're gonna be like, yeah, Super Bowl Sunday, we can't compete. We'll just show an episode from last season.
Yeah, Tame and Paula really said it feels like we only go backwards.
Anyway, let's get into
this shit.
Yeah, let's get into this episode. Look, I already summed up pretty much how I felt about it, but what did you think of this episode overall?
It was a really intense, great-ass episode.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for me, I think that it's, a lot of people have, as I've said, not really been, I know a lot of people have been very mixed on this season. They feel it's gotten too weird. They feel like nothing's really happening. And I knew that we were building up to something. And this is that something. This is that something that we were building up to. This is very much the turning point. I think I would go as far as say this is probably the best episode of Euphoria yet.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, really just, this feels like a huge turning point for the entire show. There's so many storylines that we've kind of been building up that kind of reach its crescendo in this episode. And overall, I mean, this really is this show just firing on all cylinders in the best way possible, and easily being, I think, one of the most impressive episodes of television that I've seen in quite some time. Let's just get into it, Henry, because where do we begin? I mean, the opening scene of this episode is absolutely insane. What I love right off the bat is that there's no music. There's no vignette or anything. We just get right into it. We find out, as we know last week, Elliot ended up telling Jules that, yeah, not only is Rue on drugs again, but I've been doing all of these drugs with her. She's been, using a bunch of, a various amount of them, and it's really getting to her. And so we find out right in the beginning of the episode, her mom knows, Leslie knows, and she's freaking out, and she's saying, I'm not mad at you and things like that. And this episode, I mean, look, Nika King's always been really good in this show, but my God, I mean, this episode really does show how great she is as this character. Just this scene alone, the way she's treating Rue, you can see that she's very scared of her. She is really worried of what she's going to become, but she tries to keep her composure as much as she can until she simply can't anymore. And it's just so heartbreaking to watch because, like I said last week, a major part of the show has always been about how Rue doesn't have a father and how that has very much got to her. And it's always put a strain on her relationship with Leslie, but that's never been as pivotal of a role, I think, as it's been in this episode. And after this, I mean, we need to see a lot more Nika King because Jesus Christ, she was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, there's definitely gonna be a lot more of her, and
yeah,
it was just gave a very good performance, and I'm very interested to see what happens with her.
Yeah, me too. I think we're definitely going to get more of her, especially with the way this episode ends. But I mean, come on. We got to talk about Zendaya's performance in this episode
Oh
because, look,
yeah.
going into this, I heard even before the season came out, Henry, I was reading reviews, people saying, be on the lookout for episode 5. It's like a career best performance from Zendaya. And I'm like, I mean, she's already shown that in the show. What else can she do to like fully, to just remind us how she truly is like one of the best talents working today? And then this episode happens, and my
Yes.
God, I mean, I don't think Zendaya has ever been as good as she is in this episode. Just the way that Rue is reacting to all of this, whether it's like her immediately thinking that it's Gia and that Gia squealed on her, going as far as to like almost hit her sister. The scene that especially gets to me is when she's like banging down the door and she like literally
She breaks
destroys
the
the
fucking
door.
door.
Yeah, she breaks the door right then and there. And she talks about a lot of things in this opening scene, how she doesn't like the way that she's become either. She doesn't recognize herself. She wishes that she was a different person. I love the line where she's like, you hate me, so do I. You want me to change, so do I. Like, Rue knows that she's not in the right for what she's doing, but she can't. She simply can't get clean. She talks about multiple times in this episode how hard that is for her. It's easy for her to sit down and have a conversation with Ali and say, okay, I'm going to start to get clean. It's hard for her to actually make the steps to go through that process. And I think we really do see just how much of a struggle that's been for her here.
Yeah, this is like, yeah, she definitely wants to get clean. Like, if she
Yeah.
didn't before, she definitely does now because, like, she's in some shit.
Oh yeah, even more so now. I mean, the amount of shit she gets into in this episode is just insane. But again, what I love about this opening 15 minutes is that the entire focus is on the family. Like all of the like artsy shit we've been seeing is not present in these first 15 minutes. It is just so raw and emotional, and I really loved what they ended up doing here, where she has this like really violent breakdown, and it gets to a point where she talks about she's freaking out. She's like, "Where are the drugs? I need drugs." And it turns out that basically she didn't do. It turns out that the drugs were flushed down the toilet by Jules. And the reveal that Jules was there the entire time Rue was going
And
off, you can
Elliot.
see how, yeah, Elliot was there too. You can see how embarrassing that was for Rue overall. And also, I think just how mad she is at
For the
herself and
audience
how,
as well.
oh, yeah, yeah, of course. And how she's like really projecting, I think, that hate for herself onto Jules here. And look, I told Henry about this. After this episode, I don't want to hear anyone say, like, Jules is a terrible person, Jules is in the wrong, because you try to be in that scenario. You try to be in a scenario where the person that you're in love with is constantly on drugs, they're hiding things from you, they are, making up excuses for why they're distancing themselves from you, they're not treating you in the way that they want to. Obviously, this is going to do a number on Jules, but what I especially love about Jules in this scene, and Hunter Schafer, not in this episode a lot, but for what she has, gives such a strong performance. I love the moment where, she talks about how she just wants to help her get through this because she loves her, and, she knows how hard of a process this is for her, but she really wants her to, and generally cares about her. And, Rue said some pretty hateful things to Jules last week. This is on another level, like what she says to her here. She calls her a vampire, says that like she sucks the life out of anyone that she walks into a room with, says that she doesn't love Rue, she just likes the idea of being loved and things like that. She talks about how Elliot is just as bad as her. And I mean, I don't think some of these things are wrong, but I think at the same time, like, I think Rue knows that Jules does care about her. I think it's just she's at a point where she is so pushed to her limits. She's so over the edge at this point that anyone that tries to help her, she's just going to lash out at. And it was such a like brutal depiction of what withdrawal can do to a person. And I think this scene, especially, you know, her basically just telling Jules, like, I don't want to see you again. I don't want anything to do with you. It felt like a big turning point in this show. And I know a lot of people have said, Henry, like, oh, we're going to see, you know, this recurring thing happen where like Rue and Jules constantly like lose touch and things like that. This felt pretty major. Like, I see things taking a big shift in terms of Rue and Jules's relationship from here on out. I think Jules is going to still try to contact Rue, but I think after what happened, I think she's going to be a lot different with the way she goes about things here.
Yeah, this is like rock fucking bottom for Rue.
Oh, yeah.
And like, yeah, there's definitely like some shit happening, but yeah, like I've like seen people on Twitter like saying like that like people have like Jules like lower than like the Jacobs on like a list. It's like, ew, what the fuck? Like,
the Nates?
Yeah, imagine thinking that's worse than like getting people arrested for shit they didn't do and stuff.
Yeah, imagine that's worse than someone like literally recording kiddie porn. Like,
yes,
it like, doesn't make sense. Like, yes, a lot of these characters are very fucked up, and we're well aware of that. But like,
extremely flawed.
Oh yeah, but that's what makes them compelling. And I've said this before about many of these characters is that Euphoria's never been a show about morality. That's never been what this show is about. The show is about the insecurities of teenagers and how this can really, you know, how it bottles up inside of them and how eventually it just causes them to down spiral, and how when they don't have that, you know, support system and don't try to help themselves, you know, things just continue to escalate in that way. And I think when it comes to Jules, like, Jules is probably one of the only characters in this show that is morally fucked up, but she's doing things entirely for the right reasons. She is trying. Yes, was it kind of insane for her to talk to Rue's mom about this and be in the room the entire time? Yeah, but considering what's happened to Rue and how emotionally distant she's been and how she really has not been treating Jules in the way that she really wants to, and especially knowing Jules's history, like, and this is what I've told people, like, I've heard some people say like, oh, those 2 special episodes are not necessary. I would completely disagree, because I think it gives so much more context into especially Jules as a character, you know, knowing that her mom was like an addict herself and that now Rue's kind of going through similar things. You can see why this matters so much to Jules. And that's why I'm just never going to fully buy into the, oh, Jules is a terrible person narrative. Not when you have characters like Nate on this show, characters like Cal in this show. Like, there are characters who have done far worse than Jules has. And I think especially this episode shows that, like, Jules deserve justice for Jules, like generally justice for Jules, in terms of like social media and things like that. It's ridiculous, but moving forward, I mean, I don't really know what's going to happen with these two. Like, I don't know if this is something that Jules is going to be able to forgive, because we see in the promo for next week's episode, like, they have some kind of phone call, like they're going to talk things out somehow, but I don't really know what's going to end up happening. But what I also really love in this scene is Elliot's reaction, where he talks about how he's kind of feeling guilt for what he did and how he liked Rue the way that she was and things like that. And I think this is definitely hitting at the fact that, like, Elliot doesn't realize just how bad this has gotten, and that Rue was only doing that because she was hiding, you know, who she really was. She was trying to act calm. She was trying to act like she was okay. And that's not at all what was going on. In reality, Rue's been fucked up since she's left rehab. And this episode very much, you know, it very much re-illustrates that to us. And I thought that was just a really, really good moment.
Yeah, like, you force shit on people, they're just gonna hide more stuff from you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, so I think that first like 15 minutes, we get to a point after this sort of mini intervention. We're gonna have another intervention later on, which is even more insane than this one. It gets to a point where Leslie's like, you know what? I can't take this anymore. I want to help you. I'm going to get you to rehab. We're going to go to the doctor's office. And I think we knew that like Rue wasn't going to go. Like there was nothing that Leslie could do to persuade Rue to actually like take those steps. Cause I think Rue generally is like afraid. Like she's gotten to a point where she doesn't know who she is without these drugs. It's like part of her identity in this way. And I've talked about this before, but like that's why I feel like so much of this season, people have said like that's Rue's like only identity trait. That's kind of the point because Rue doesn't really know who she is without being an addict. And the idea of her getting clean, the idea of her not being into drugs is scary to her. That's not something that she wants to do. And so the moment where, you can see she's having a full blown panic attack when she's in the car, she doesn't really want to get that help. And so she runs out of the car, nearly like is hit by a truck. I mean, there were so many points in this episode, Henry, where like, Rue's not going to die, but it feels like maybe she could have. Like she came so close to dying at so many points in this episode. And it's just like hats off to Sam Levinson and everyone who was involved in like the making of this episode, because they really did a great job of building that tension. But what an amazing like first 15 minutes. We've only talked about the first 15 minutes. We are 16 minutes into this video, Henry, and we've only talked about the first 15 minutes of this episode. But again, really does sum up just how
great TV.
Yeah, I mean, it really does sum up just how intense this episode really was, how much was going on here. There was so much that went down in these 15 minutes that I think are going to be so crucial to the rest of the show. I don't know how much longer Euphoria is going to go. We know, obviously, they have a season 3. I don't know if they're going to go for like 4 and 5 or whatever. But I do know that everything that we saw in these first 15 minutes are probably going to be really important within the rest of the show, whether it's, the fractured relationship between Rue and Jules, and how is that really are they going to be able to mend fences, or are they just going to be at a distance because of this? Is this going to rapidly affect their relationship? Leslie and her wanting to help Rue, but at the same time, Rue not really wanting to get that help. Gia, when Rue's telling Gia, like, you better be an astronaut, you better be like a physicist or something like that, or mom's going to be the problem here, mom's the failure. Like, you can see how much guilt Gia is also feeling in this situation. She's so worried that she's going to become like Rue, which, by the way, is a brilliant arc for her character, because season 1, if you remember, like, she was pursuing similar habits as Rue, and Rue was trying to like get her away from that. Now we're at a point where Gia wants nothing to do with this. Like, she's so terrified of what could become of her. Just so much going on in these first 15 minutes that I think are just going to be so important within the rest of the show.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I think we've talked enough about the first 15 minutes of this episode and how amazing it was. Really, I mean, if it was just the first 15 minutes, like that alone would have been like an amazing episode, but it's everything else that we get here. Because while the first 15 minutes is this very heavy, like, family drama between like Rue and Leslie and Gia, the rest of this episode is basically a full-on like foot chase, and it is one of the most riveting things I have seen in a very long time. Rue throughout the rest of this episode is basically on the run, pretty much aimlessly, not really knowing where to go, but just doing what she can to get drugs, to feel better about herself, and she makes a lot of stops along the way. And the first stop she makes, Henry, is a pretty crucial one. She ends up walking in to Lexi's house, and I love Lexi's response at first, where she's like, "Are you sick? I have rehearsal tomorrow." Like, I thought that was a really funny line. And we get this moment with like Lexi and Cassie's mom where she's asking Rue if she's in AA or NA and how she doesn't like Alcoholics Anonymous. And I mean, we know their mom's like all kind of fucked up. Like, this is not shocking. So like, I was not surprised that she reacted that way. But the big moment is when Rue is talking about how she doesn't really want to get clean. We see that Leslie is also there, kind of doing this like mini intervention of sorts for her. And at first I thought this is what the rest of the episode was going to be. It was going to be like a bottle episode of sorts where all the characters were together. We got some really cool interactions. Like, we've never really seen Rue's mom interact with anyone outside of like Rue's family circle.
Yeah.
So I thought it was cool to like actually get to see that. But the big moment, of course, Henry comes in when Cassie has to open her mouth. Cassie has to do what she does and open her mouth and say to Rue, you know, it's going to get better. You just got to do it one day at a time. And Rue finds this pretty hypocritical because Rue knows that Cassie is also going through a lot of damage herself. And she calls out Cassie and literally asks her, how long have you been having sex with Nate Jacobs? And my God, when she said that, I was like, oh my God, this isn't a dream sequence this time around. Like, this is real. This is happening. This is how it happened. And I really wasn't prepared for this, to be honest with you. Like, I expected for us to get this in the penultimate episode. Like, I thought that's what was going to happen. The penultimate episode of the season would be like the play. We'd get like the fallout of it in episode 8. But that's not what happens here. Maddie is right there, finds out what's going on. Everyone else is trying to like move on from it because they know how Maddie is going to react. And she understandably explodes. She's like, I'm going to get violent. She starts, you know, questioning Cassie at how long it's happened. And that's it. Cat's out of the bag now. Maddie knows. And I don't know what's going to happen now. Like, the way next week's promo goes down, it seems like everyone's going to confront Cassie on this, and Maddie is most likely going to leak Nate's dad's tape because, I mean, what reason does she not have to at this point? She definitely is going to put that out there because she talks about how at like the end of the promo, she's like, I have other ideas when it comes to Nate, and we see her like grab the disc. So yeah, I mean, this is not going to be good for really anyone. This is, I think, how Cal's going to come back into the fold and things like that. But yeah, I mean, did you expect it to turn out this way, Henry? Like, what did you think of like this whole reveal?
Like, it was inevitable.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, I know they had like the prologue. It's like, it shows Rue like seeing them, so it's like, oh shit, it's gonna come out, and
yeah,
it just does. And like, of course, like, Rue mainly did it to like escape from that situation, but still, like, it's out there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what really got to me is like just how sudden this was. Like, I was not expecting it to come out in this way. So unprompted. Like, Rue just said it right then and there. This was literally like, you know, that meme of like that girl like walking away from like that like explosion? That was literally Rue in this episode. She's like, I'm gonna drop as many fucking bombs as I can, and I don't care what happens, because that's just how much Rue is just so over everything. She doesn't really care anymore. She just is gonna say whatever comes to her mind, and you can just see the way that this is going to play out. But I really like the way that was handled. I like that we didn't focus on it too much in this episode, but we know that it's out there. We know that it's going to have damaging consequences on
the fact that it happened, and it was like all footnote in this episode.
Yeah, definitely. It really just shows just how much was really going on here. And it is why I think when people think of Euphoria, like, I do think this is the episode they're going to think of. And it's going to be for moments like this where like it just drops like so unceremoniously. I liked how uneventful this was. It felt so much more realistic in that way. And I really liked the way that whole thing went down. But after that, Rue does end up getting out of of there. She doesn't really want anything to do, mainly because she doesn't want an intervention. Like you can see, she doesn't want an intervention. She doesn't want to talk about her problems. She just wants drugs. That's all she cares about. And what does she do next? She goes to Fesco's house. And when this happened, I was like, oh God, this is going to be really bad because, I mean, like I said, this really does feel like a turning point for everyone. Rue and Fesco's friendship is kind of fucked after this episode with the way things play out here because, you know, she goes into his house pretty much just like, you know, completely unprompted. He doesn't expect her to be there, you know, and he's asking if she's okay. He asked if she wants Pepto-Bismol. And what I really loved about specifically Angus Cloud's performance in this scene is that you see how nurturing and like caring Fesco's been for Rue all of this time. He's kind of been like this brotherly figure towards her, always looking out for her, doing whatever he can to make sure, you know, things go the way that she wants it to, anything that makes her happy. But even characters like Fesco are eventually going to draw the line. And that's what happens in this episode. It just gets to a point where he realizes what Rue's doing. She's looking for drugs and he doesn't want anything to do with that. And he literally kicks her out and tells her to never come back. So yeah, that was, again, very sudden, but it felt very real in that way. And considering how much Fez is dealing with, you know, he's literally we forget this. He's literally harboring a killer right now. Like, I think we've kind of forgotten about the fact he literally is harboring a killer. He has, you know, it's been discovered that Mouse is dead and he doesn't know what's going to come of that. Plus, you still have all the stuff going on with Nate. He doesn't really know if that is fully resolved either. And you have Ashtray, who is just really going too far. This is the last thing that he really needed. And him just like but even with that said, like him completely just kicking her out and like dragging her by the ear and just being like, never come here again, was such a shocking moment for Fesco, but it made so much sense because eventually he's going to reach his breaking point. And that's exactly what happened here.
Mm-hmm. Definitely like burning all the bridges.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of stuff going on here. So yeah, after this happens, Rue, again, she's just at a point where now her entire mission is that she knows those drugs have been flushed down the toilet, but she also knows that she still is kind of working as this dealer for Lori. And she knows that Lori is probably going to want some form of money. So what she decides to do is she breaks into this very rich couple's house, steals some jewelry, almost gets caught, narrowly escapes from these cops. I didn't know what was going to happen in that scene where they're like questioning her and they can tell she's like not fully with it. They can tell that she's like, you know, just not sober at all. And she's like running away from them, you know, from like that. There were so many moments where like she nearly could have gotten hurt when she's like near that barbecue and there's that fire there. Just so many incredible scenes going on in terms of tension. Again, you knew Rue wasn't going to die, but it's moments like that where you think maybe she can. And I thought that was just so well effective, the way that all played out.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's doing some shit.
Yeah, definitely. But eventually she does get to Lori's house and we get a very interesting conversation, to say the least, with Lori. And Martha Kelly has really been killing it this entire season. I think they really couldn't have found a better person to play this character but Martha Kelly, mainly because of, I think, just her voice in general. Like, Martha Kelly has this very like soothing type voice that's like, you know, you listen to her and it seems like everything's going to be okay, but you know there's something sinister brewing. And we really do get to see that here, where at first it seems like she takes this sort of empathetic approach to Rue, where she talks about how eventually, you know, the longer you use, the less emotions you're going to feel, and that eventually it's going to hollow you out entirely to the point where things that once affected you don't affect you anymore. And honestly, that's the scariest thing that we've heard, I think, all episode. Like, the idea that drugs can affect you that badly to the point where you don't feel anything anymore. And you can get the sense that that's kind of what's happened to Lori. Like, she once was a much different person. She had this idyllic family life, but it wasn't enough for her. She was so heavily into drugs that she didn't want to withdraw anymore. And it's like the worst possible feeling that she could have had. And like, I don't know if I misheard this, Henry, but it almost sounded like she was telling Rue that like she's going to sell her into prostitution to like get her drugs. Cause she talks about how like there are certain things, like even without drugs, there are other things that women can do to please others. And I was like, what the fuck are you getting at, Lori? Like, this was a very interesting conversation. Really went from this like very nurturing conversation to something a lot more sinister. I think they're just doing a really great job at building this character.
Yeah, it's possible that like maybe she did sell her and to someone, because like we'll get to that like a little later, but some stuff happens.
Yeah, we don't really know the full extent of what happens after this sequence where, you know, basically she tells Rue, well, there are things that I had that could have maybe helped you. And she tells Rue she has morphine, and Rue has never really done morphine before, but you can tell that she is just so anxious to consume any type of drug. She doesn't care how she gets it. She's just like, yeah, I'll take the morphine. And even though you can see that Rue is like physically uncomfortable during this entire sequence where she's injecting this morphine into her, such a hard scene to watch, may I say, when she's doing that. And you can see just you're wincing in pain right there with Rue. You know, after this, we get this really beautiful montage of like Rue and her imagining that her father is bathing her, and then her reading like her eulogy, when like her father's eulogy when he died. This is stuff that we've really never seen before. Obviously, you know, it's stuff that I think is important, but I don't think it's stuff that I thought we were ever really going to see. And the fact that we got this here, I think is very important, because it kind of shows us a Rue when she was a lot happier in her life, when she had other things. She didn't need drugs to make her happy. She didn't need drugs to satisfy her. She had a father that generally loved her, and she felt generally loved. And I think we get the sense she had like a very close relationship with him. And I think just the contrast between this more younger and sort of innocent Rue to the much more, you know, over, you know, the much more, you know, heavily addicted and frequently, you know, this very manipulative version of Rue, I thought was just so well handled, and Zendaya just did such a great job with contrasting that here.
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, it's like important to see like these moments with like her past and stuff.
Yeah, it was very, very intense to watch play out. And I think, you know, the way this episode ends, eventually she narrowly escapes the house. We have that guy from episode 1 that was telling everyone to like get naked. I thought he was like gonna come after her, but narrowly, you know, escapes the house. Like I said, he's so close to finding her, and she gets out of that house. And when she runs away, and finally we don't know where she's gonna go, but we hear a familiar voice, and it's Leslie, and all she says is Rue's name, and we know exactly what that means, because I think the way this is ending, I think Rue now knows the severity of what she's gotten herself involved in, and the first thing she's going to try to do is try to repair some of these relationships. She knows what she's done. She knows that there are people in her life that are caring for her. It's really just a matter of, does she want to fix them? Is that more important to her than the drugs? And I don't think we have the answer to that yet. I think that's something that the rest of the show is really going to dive into, is like, there are so many people that want to help Rue, that want to help her kick this habit once and for all. but is she willing to really get that help? Is she really willing to like put herself out there and admit like, yes, I'm an addict and I need to do something about it? Or is she just going to do the easy thing and just keep sliding by with these endless amounts of drugs? You know, I don't think we're going to see that answer for a while, but it was a really powerful way to end the episode, knowing that she did in fact come back home, that she is maybe willing to listen to her mom a bit more with the way things wrapped up. What do you think the ending is really hinting at?
Yeah, it doesn't like specifically show her coming home, but like it heavily implies it.
Yeah.
Which I think like she came home because like
Oh, yeah.
this is like
Yeah, she definitely did.
it's like she definitely like more than ever wants to like get clean, I think.
Oh
And
yeah, especially just seeing like people like Lori and like what's happened to her. I think similar to how Gia's so scared of Rue. I think she's like so scared of Lori.
yeah.
So yeah, that is the way we do wrap things up here. Just such an intense episode, so much to really discuss. I really want to talk about Sam Levinson's directing in this episode because I've talked about this season how he really has been very experimental. He's been trying to get a lot more artsier. He's been doing a lot of things that I think some people haven't really loved. This episode felt way more stripped back. This was really him just taking the bare essentials of what makes the show so good, but also really kind of like turning it on its head. I mean, I don't think the show has ever been this intense before. I have not been hyperventilating in the way that I was, during this episode when it comes to the show. I think the last time I was the Carnival episode, to be honest with you, but even more so in this episode, because the Carnival episode was more of like, what's going to happen? Here, it was like, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen to Rue here. Like, I was so worried. Like, I was thinking of all the worst possible outcomes that could happen to Rue. And I think his directing is just the best we've ever seen from him in terms of this show. This really did feel like that turning point that really is just going to, again, just up the ante of every single storyline that's going on here. And I think he just did such a masterful job with that throughout this entire episode.
Yeah, for sure. Like, this has been like the most like original style like we've gotten from the show since like special episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah, it actually did very much
as
have
it
the vibe
goes
of that
on.
one, especially Trouble Don't Always Last. I think it very much had the vibe of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Like that was kind of like I think the precursor to like what this episode was really going to be. So yeah, I think just all in all, really incredible directing from him here. I do want to get into the writing for this episode as well, because again, I think the writing was just so spot on in this episode. Such just like a brutal and realistic depiction of withdrawal and what that can really do to someone, but also again, really just feeling like when we talk about Euphoria, like this is the episode we're going to be thinking of. This isn't their Ozymandias, but it is their fly. I think it's their fly, Henry. I think that's the best way to describe it. They haven't gotten their Ozymandias yet, but this is going to be their fly. And I think what we really do get here, again, is just I think it just was so satisfying the way everything turned out, with every single plot thread really coming to a head in this episode. The only plot thread that didn't come to a head once again is Kat, because Sam Levinson doesn't care about her, I guess, this season.
Yeah.
But even at that, like, it wasn't about her. This episode was fully about Rue. She was at the forefront. And I think this episode just reminded us like how great this show can be when it is focused. And I think this episode was just a perfect example of that. Little moments like the Cassie reveal and things like that were just so masterfully handled all around. Just really strong episode, I think, in terms of writing.
Definitely. There's a lot going on, and like keeps you guessing on the edge of your seat.
Oh yeah, it keeps you guessing. The dialogue was just downright poetic in this episode, just really great stuff. And then cinematography wise as well, I really loved in the like behind the scenes thing, like how much they flexed about the cinematography in this episode, because it was definitely worth marveling at. I mean, the scene where she's just like it's like a tracking shot and she's running down so aimlessly, I thought was so well handled. And the way that she's like, trying to like avoid all of this traffic, these cars are like crashing into each other, just perfectly put you into the chaos of this episode. You really felt like you were with Rue every step of the way, and I think that's why this episode just gave you so much anxiety. I think that's why this episode was just so intense in that way, is because it really did feel like we were right there with her. It was very intimate in that way. And I think Euphoria has definitely been intimate in that way before, but it's episodes like this that really do show how great the show is when it comes to that kind of stuff. I mean, the scene with the morphine as well, like I said, I think was another really big standout for me. Very hard to watch, but just very well executed. The montage with her dad, so many great things going on in terms of cinematography.
Yeah, I got a lot of great shots here. Like,
Oh yeah,
the one where like Lori's giving Rue a bath, and we're
yep,
just closed in on like this morphine just sitting there.
yeah,
Know the dread is
yeah.
coming.
Exactly. It was a really good way of like setting up, because like we know what that's going to do to her, but it's like the way that they built up in terms of like anticipation, I think was really strong for sure. I really liked the way that all played out. And then I think when it gets to, when it comes to the other thing I really do want to talk about is the score in this episode. Very minimalistic from Labyrinth. I always do talk about how great his score is, and he always does kill it in this show. But I noticed in this episode, they did not rely on the score as much as they did. And I think it was a good choice because, again, the episode was much more stripped back in that way. Those first 15 minutes, just so raw. There's no music or anything playing. It was just so good the way that all played out. I really liked what they did when it came to the music in this entire episode. Again, just very stripped back, and I think it definitely did pay off in the end. And the pacing as well was just so great, so relentless. It really did feel just like you had no idea what was going to happen throughout the entire episode. And I just thought overall there's so much great stuff going on here technical wise.
Yeah, definitely cool to have like an episode that's more with like emotions than
Oh
with
yeah.
like style and stuff.
Yeah, I hope they do more episodes like this, because for me, like, this is really Euphoria at its best for me. This is very much what the show I think needs to be more moving forward. And look, I've loved season 2. I really have, but I think this episode really just showed what this show can do when it really is like firing on all cylinders. I want to see more of this. I mean, Zendaya, Nika King, Hunter Schafer, Storm Reid, even everyone at the top of their game throughout this entire episode. Sydney Sweeney, great in the one scene that she's in here as well. The way this episode depicted, withdrawal, the way this episode dived deeper into Rue's psyche, kind of showing how she doesn't really want to be this way, but it's very difficult for her to fully kick this habit, I think is going to be very relatable to a lot of people. And I think the way this episode, really puts you into that chaotic sort of world of Rue, someone who is so destined to, get these drugs, she's so desperate to get these drugs, but yet she doesn't really know who she is besides that. She has no other identity besides becoming that way. And contrasting that with Lori, someone who has become so content with selling drugs, has so little emotion, nothing really affects her anymore. I thought was just so wonderfully handled. So many amazing things going on here. Like I said, for me, I think when we look back back on the show, this is really the episode of Euphoria that we are going to think about, or at least I very much do hope we do, and very much so deserves all the praise it's gotten. So I am going to give this week's episode of Euphoria, Season 2, Episode 5, Stand Still Like the Hummingbird, an A+. I think that for me, this really just felt like the, like I said, the pivotal point of the entire show. I don't know what the rest of the season is going to entail, but I very highly doubt they're going to be able to top this episode moving forward with the way everything played out. Why are we sharing voodoo here? What does Cats have to do?
Why not?
You know what? Cats is a representation of Rue when she's high. Like, this is what she sees. This is what she sees. But anyway, I am going to cut to you anyway, because we're going to do your outro before we close things out here.
All right. Chasing ducks, wearing an orange shoe. Oh, what fun it is to ride until you stepped in.
I don't know what that was.
That was this random song from like a Cartoon Network commercial from like 2008.
I have definitely not heard that. What the hell?
Yes, you can follow me on the Twitters at Henzo Ewing, on the Letterboxd at Henry Ewing. You can find my YouTube channel, which is my name, Henry Ewing. I just posted a sexy video of Kevin and myself and some of our friends dancing.
Oh, God.
Great times.
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. You can watch us be whiter than we already are. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's it for
Fuck is this white people shit, as this film fan would say.
Yes, shout out to Film Fennel 599 for that iconic line. But anyway, speaking of Film Fennel 599, our review for the season, maybe series finale of Book of Boba Fett will be coming up very soon. I don't know when, but we will be getting that out eventually. But anyway, that's it for our review of this week's episode of Euphoria. So much to talk about. So much is going down. We only have 3 episodes left, Henry. Like, oh my God, this season is just flying by, and I don't really know what's going to happen moving forward, how this is really going to play out, especially with the way this episode went. You know, we'll really just have to see what does end up happening. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in our next video, and we will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
Moving on in the chance, taking time, you gotta stay together.
That was not okay. That is not, no. We do not